Okay, so I've sort of shown you guys this a little earlier too. If you want to, you don't necessarily have to use Z-spheres to create your mesh. You can basically start by going right into Dynamesh. So I'll activate Dynamesh here. And if you wanted to, again, use the body parts, which is an okay start, or start with a base mesh. Let me just figure out what I'm facing here. If you want to get oriented to it, it often helps to just quickly turn on the floor option just while you start. So, you can start with like a male-female torso. You can, start your character mesh that way and skew and adjust proportions. So you don't necessarily have to feel like you have to Z-sphere things, right? Oops. I'm gonna move this down. But yeah, Z-spheres just might help you get kind of a quick start, right? It's a huge, huge noggin. So let's scale this down a bit. So yeah, as you create your character, right, you can keep going into the insert mesh body parts. Hit M. You can grab, right, male, female arms, male, female legs. You can rotate them into position. You can skew them by scaling, warping, right? And again, when you're in Dynamesh, you can just simply control, click, and drag, and it blends all this stuff together, right? So I just wanted to cover, though, dealing with stylized sculpting. So a lot of times you'll see this, again, I sort of mentioned a bit earlier, you'll see this sort of transition from sort of soft round forms to sort of sharp edges, creases, that sort of thing, right? So I'll just do a very kind of quick mock-up here. So I'll start with my standard kind of skeletal shaping. By the way, too, in cartoony, sort of more stylized characters, you'll often see simple shapes, right? So a lot of times, if you are building with Dynamesh, and you can start this way too, where you start with Z-spheres, do that kind of low-res thing, go right into Dynamesh, and then start adding more of those kind of big blocking forms. With like a nose, for example, it's often useful to start with, right, simple shapes. We'll go a little smaller here. And maybe I'll do a brush insert cylinder. So I'll actually draw really, really large and then scale it back. And I'll just adjust this. Clear the mask. Once we Dynamesh, I might need a higher resolution for that, so I'll just clear that. So I'll just kind of show you a quick example of this sort of like rounded shape, stylizing a bit in just this sort of area of the face, and then the same principles would apply throughout a whole bunch of other areas. So. Again, I'm going to have to up the resolution a little bit here. So my method is basically to use something like Dam Standard. There's two different trim brushes as well, so I'll show you guys that in a second. But a lot of times you'll sort of see this technique, again, where you kind of, you know, sketch in, find a nice shape, a nice kind of plane to work with. If you're looking for planes in the face or body, you can use Trim Dynamic, or so Trim Dynamic will tend to follow the curvature of a surface and create a kind of flat edge. So this can be nice if you want to create a really kind of crisp line, right, to create this underhang for the arch of the brow. And it creates this nice kind of stylized look already, right? It's pretty cool. H polish does something similar. It catches an edge, and I believe it sort of maintains that edge a little more from the angle at which you're coming at it from. So you can do that where you know, trim or use H polish, and then you can either pinch along those edges. Be careful along the bridge of the nose. So it creates kind of a hard ridge, and then you get something like that, right? So this is how you can kind of transition a bit from sort of nice rounded shapes in the forehead and the cheeks, and then transition into something like the brow ridge. Another tool which you've seen me use a few times similarly to get the same effect. So let me maybe sculpt in some cheeks and stuff here. So I'm just adjusting my opacity and whatnot here. Maybe I'll do a little insert sphere just so I can get an idea for the eyes. And then I'll split those, split unmask points. So similarly too, right, you can use Dam Standard to get a similar effect. So you can hold Alt, create a bit of a ridge, and then maybe with a lower intensity as well, right? So you can kind of create those sort of same ridge lines. So let's say we're doing like the nasal labial fold. So build up to one side here. All right, and then you can come in with either H polish or trim dynamic to one side. And then let's say you're finding the cheek line. Sometimes again there'll be for those prominent protrusions, right? We can use either H polish or trim dynamic to one side to kind of find that plane and then sort of blend it in. So you get this really kind of sudden and stark transition in the surface, right? So those are kind of a few basic ideas. Something else that I will often do as well is use this clay polish tool. And again, you've seen me do this in early blocking stages. I'll set the soften to anywhere between 30 and 50, and then my rule of thumb is to use about half that in sharpening. So when you do a clay polish, it kind of tightens up all those forms. It does kind of stretch and pull the mesh a bit, and it actually creates a mask along those harder creased areas. So you want to control, click, and drag to remove it. The masking, it's actually almost imperceptible, and then you want to, if you're still dynameshing, you want to maybe just control, click, and drag a second time to redistribute that. There. Okay, so depending again on age, you know, the character design or whatever, you know, you can put these sort of things in strategically to get these kind of more interesting stylized kind of volumes and changes in plane. I haven't done eyelids or anything yet. A lot of times too with cartoon characters you can actually kind of just duplicate the mesh. So let me just scale this up a little bit. Let's turn on the rest of this. Let me turn off perspective and go to, I might just use actually trim curve instead of clip curve. All right, so we can kind of get these half sphere kind of lids. And I'll go to Z plugin, Subtool Master, and you can do a quick mirror. So I want to actually mirror vertically, which would be the Y axis. Now, I just got to find out where they went. Oh, wrong direction. So let's go back to Z plugin, mirror. I guess in this case it's the Z. So I'll just move those. We just mask, oops, mask this. There we go. So yeah, if you want to do simple cartoony eyelids, this is kind of an okay way to do it. And again, you know, even if you sculpt and touch things up, you can always come back again with trim polish, pinching, or dam standard, you know. Kind of find those interesting ridge lines in the face. Okay, so that's just sort of a basic intro. It's kind of in a way similar to when you do hair sculpting as well, that sort of same technique where you're just kind of finding the big shapes and accentuating it with a combination of clay tubes, dam standard, or in this case we're now using like pinch, age polish, or trim dynamic, one of those three to create some of those harder ridges in certain spots. Yeah, the other thing too with stylized characters, oftentimes, especially in the face, you're looking at some proportional relationships are maintained. So that basically means, you know, the corners of the, in this case it's kind of a little bit out of proportion, but you know, usually one of the major proportion relationships, like the irises, will line up with the corners of the mouth, or the inner corner of the eye will line up with the edge of the nose. You sort of see that a lot. So sometimes, you know, proportions are grossly exaggerated, but at least one anatomical relationship is sort of kept in place, right? With the head generally being about 5.5 eye openings across. And again, it looks a little exaggerated here, but it seems like the corner of the mouth probably lines up with the pupils, right? Same thing. In this case, they've exaggerated, so the inner corners of the eyes do not match up with the nostrils, but the pupils match up with the corners of the nostrils, or the turn of the nostril, right? So here, lips line up with the pupils, iris. So hopefully that helps you guys with the creation of your characters.